Welcome to my ranking of the 2023 Supercars liveries. Now, if you've checked out the first few videos here on the channel, you probably know by now that I'm a big fan of the shape of these new Gen 3 cars. So today, I want to take a look at the different paint jobs the teams have put on them and let you know which ones I love and which ones, for me at least, have missed the mark. A few disclaimers before we sort the good from the bad. The first one being that this is just my personal opinion. Liveries are super subjective, so you're more than welcome to share your own thoughts down in the comments below. But please remember, if my opinion differs from yours, that's okay. Please don't come at me too hard with your comments. The second disclaimer is that I haven't seen these things in the flesh. I'm going to have to wait to round 3 in Perth before I see them in person. And in past seasons, my opinions have changed on liveries when I've actually seen them for real, so that could also happen throughout this season. And finally, obviously teams that have a whole bunch of things to consider when designing a livery. There's a lot of commercial considerations and pressures that I'm going to largely disregard today. I'm very much going to focus on the final product, but I'm also aware there's a lot more going on in the background that impacts the final design. Okay, with the T's and C's out of the way, let's start talking about some of these cars. And I want to kick off the ranking by setting a very high benchmark. So the first car we're going to pop on the list is going straight to the epic category, and that is Cam Waters and his monster Mustang. I love this livery. Despite being a GM guy, I think this is one of the strongest liveries in the supercars field and has been for a number of years. And I think it looks even better on the Gen 3 machinery. The livery is a bit plainer than I expected around the front wheel arch area. I thought we'd see more sponsorship there. But I think in terms of the design, that's still a win overall because it looks nice and distinct. And I think we'll be seeing this thing standing out quite prominently on the racetrack, chances are towards the pointy end of the field as well. I've roughly grouped these by teams, so let's take a look at the Castrol Mustang next, and I'm going to pop this one in the solid category. I think it's a really nice livery. This is one that I'm really keen to see in person actually, because it might influence my ranking. But for now, I'm going to pop it in solid purely because I think Castrol have had some better liveries in recent years. This one's by no means bad, but I think they've set a very high standard for themselves. And this one just looks a little bit on the plainer side. In recent years, you know, even back as far as the Nissan Altimas, they had some, you know, pretty strong decals going on, which really layered the design, if you will, with lots of red, white, and black as well, sometimes incorporated into the livery. This one's a bit more modern, a bit more sleek, a bit more blocky, if you will, which isn't bad, but for me, it just isn't their best work. So I'm going to pop that one in solid, but still a very good looking car. Sadly, that brings us to the Tickford car that I'm really not a fan of, and that is the Tradie Mustang. I'm going to pop this one in okay, not bad, simply because I see a lot of potential here, and that's why it frustrates me. I love the black and the sort of fluorescent yellow look we've got going on with the Tradie here. I love the side profile of this car, but the thing that lets it down for me is the Money Me sponsorship on the bonnet. Their light green branding just clashes so hard with this yellow Tradie sponsorship, and for me, I would have loved to see this car, you know, Tradie from front to back with a few minor sponsors here and there, but that Money Me logo so prominent on the bonnet with that green clashing with the yellow, for me, it just looks a bit disjointed and lets down what would otherwise be a pretty strong and distinct livery, I reckon, on the racetrack. So that one, I see the potential. Again, very conscious of the commercial pressures. It's good to have sponsors nevertheless, but for me, this one isn't the best livery just because of how much those two sponsors clash in the design. Next up, we have James Courtney in the Snowy River Caravans entry. I think this is becoming a pretty sort of distinct paint job over recent years, but even then, I'm actually going to pop it in the okay category, just because there's a bit of a theme going on this year with unnecessary black bonnets. I don't know why it's happened this year, but a lot of teams are running really sort of dark bonnets, black bonnets, and they're not having too much black on the rest of the car. And I think this is an example of that, where you've got this massive black patch here on the front, but not too much of it going on at the back. And for me, it just sort of imbalances the livery. So for me, while I like this car, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's still certainly better than the Tradie car going on here. For me, it's just a bit disjointed, looks a bit different at the front to the back. It doesn't look like one harmonious design. So that one's going in the okay category for me as well. Let's get some positivity going though. I am a huge fan of the DeWalt Camaro. That one's going straight in the epic category for me. I absolutely love this thing. I've got a soft spot for yellow and black race cars, and I think this one looks absolutely awesome. Now, I did sort of just mention how a lot of teams have gone for the black bonnets this year, and how that's sort of a bit of a weird design trend that's frustrating me a little bit, but here I think is an example of how you do it correctly. The black bonnet is there, but it sort of works with the rest of the livery. You've got quite a bit of black, you know, on the side of the car, even down by the front bumper. It's just present and a key part of that livery from front to back, which is why I think it works so well on this car. Big fan of that livery. I think they've smashed it out of the park. This one here, the Hino car, yeah, not sure how I feel about this one. This is one that I'm very keen to see in person. For me, it just looks like a worse version of the DeWalt car. They've kind of got a roughly similar pattern going on with the color scheme. Obviously, the red instead of the yellow. I think when I see this in person, I'm going to pop it in solid, but for now, I'm just going to put it in okay. Yeah, I think my opinion's going to change on that one, as I said, but for now, jury's out a little bit. I think these renders, the lighting that's been used in that particular photo isn't the greatest either. I think in person, that one's probably going to look a bit more striking than it does right now. Speaking of striking, we've got Brad Jones Racing coming up next, and they've got sort of like the whole spectrum going on for me at least. I'm going to start off on a negative note, unfortunately. I'm really not a fan of these two white-based cars. The Pizza Hut livery, it just looks a bit cheap to me. It looks like the kind of livery you select in a racing game like Grid or something where you've got fictional sponsors, and it's like, yeah, they've had a crack at designing a realistic looking race car livery, but something's not quite right about it. It just doesn't look authentic. That's kind of the vibes I'm getting from the Pizza Hut car, unfortunately. And while the Jets sponsored Camaro, I think, does it a little bit better than the Pizza Hut Mustang. I like the stripes. I feel like it's just got a little bit messy with the Jet sponsorship, especially on the bonnet. It's actually really hard to see that logo against the stripes there. And I don't know, I feel like I would have liked to see a bit more black or silver incorporated into this livery, maybe to make it pop just that little bit more. So for me, I'm also going to pop that one in the bad category. Another one that I'm super keen to see in person is the Middies entry. This thing is certainly different. You're certainly going to know which car that one is. And I don't know whether I want to put it in the okay category because it, again, does have that weirdly, black bonnet where there's no real black on the rest of the livery. So that for me is kind of pushing it into the okay category. But at the same time, I like that it's different. I like that it's bold. It certainly stands out. So I think I'm going to be generous here and I'm going to pop that in solid because I think when I see that in person, that's probably where I'm going to put it. I also really like the R&J batteries entry for Heimgartner. Once again, an example of where the black bonnet works with the rest of the car, just because the roof is so blacked out as well, and the black R in the livery on the side as well sort of brings it all together. And yeah, I think this is just a really clean livery. They've got a few colors going on with the white, the black, and the yellow, but it all sort of works together really, really nicely. So that's another solid one for me, and who knows, that might even end up in a higher category by the end of the year. Now, let's have a look at Walkinshaw and Andretti United. Obviously switching over from GM, now going to Ford. And they have rolled out of the blocks with some two very good looking race cars in my opinion. My personal favorite out of the two is absolutely Nick Percat's livery here. This Mustang looks awesome. It looks a bit like a NASCAR actually, if you ask me. I'm very, very fond of it. I love the way they've sort of integrated a bit of decals in as well. That works so well with the sponsors in terms of the color scheme. I think that frames the NTI logo really nicely. And once again, they've got sort of an odd color with the red here and there, but it's sort of distributed evenly. We don't have a random red spot at one end of the car and not at the other. Big fan of this one overall. I think this is going to be one of the best looking liveries on track this year. Then we have Chaz Mostert's car. Now this one fundamentally has the same livery, but the NTI has been replaced with Optus. And as a result, the color is also a bit different on the side profile mainly. Now I don't dislike this, but I don't think it's quite as strong as the Percat livery. So I'm going to pop this one in solid. But yeah, I do like that, this blue look has been sort of associated with Chaz Mostert for me for a few years now. So I really like that the livery kind of matches the character of the driver. Obviously, he's got a lot of Optus ties. So I like that element of it. But for me, just in comparison to Percat's car, which just looks a bit more like a traditional race car. It isn't quite as strong, but it's certainly not far off. Alrighty, we're working our way through these. Now let's take a look at the Matt Stone Racing Truck Assist Camaros. These ones I'm going back and forth on. I really like the orange. I love that color, and again, the images from the track, this orange really pops. But once again, I feel like they could have done more with the black throughout the livery in terms of, you know, the way it flows around the car. Here it's, you know, that very solid edge around the bonnet, once again, that I've sort of harked on about in this video. But for me, I think this is a very striking set of cars. I think for a small team, they present really well just about every single year. I'm going to pop that one in solid. Again, I feel like they could have done more with the black in terms of how that's arranged, but it's still a very good looking car overall. And again, that orange is going to stand out on the track. In terms of keeping the solid theme going, I think I'm going to, am I going to put Penrite there? Now this is a tricky one because I think Penrite, like Monster, have produced some of the best looking liveries in supercars in recent years, so they've set a very high bar for themselves. The only thing that detracts from the latest Penrite livery for me is just the amount of white they've got on there. I like the white, but I feel like it's a bit blocky on the new car. Especially at the rear, by the rear wing on the side of the vehicle. I'm gonna pop that one in solid, but I am still a very big fan of how those cars look. And I think if the white wasn't quite so prominent in some of those areas around the front splitter and towards the back of the car, I probably would have put that one in epic. All right, the next two cars are interesting ones. We've got the Erebus Coca-Cola Camaro, and then we've got the CoolDrive Mustang. Now, when I first did my reactions to these two cars, I think I was probably a little bit more generous on my first impressions purely because it was the first Mustang we'd seen in its completed form and the first Camaro we'd seen in its completed form, you know, complete with a livery as well, I mean. So my thoughts on them have changed a little bit since their initial reveals. This Erebus livery, originally I probably would have put it in epic, but once again, it's going to go to solid. You can sort of see a theme going on here. I think it's a good looking car. Once again, the black bonnet has been a bit of a trend. I didn't know that when I first saw the Erebus car being one of the first revealed. So, you know, for me, I wasn't overly bored with it at that point, but, you know, we've had so many cars with that black bonnet come out since then. So for me, it's kind of, you know, lost a little bit of its uniqueness, but I'm still a big fan of this car. I think it looks really good. They've got lots of sponsors. I think I saw someone describe it a bit NASCAR-like as well with, you know, the number of sponsors they've got crammed on this machine. And yeah, I think with a few more years, I think Coca-Cola are signed for next year as well. I'm curious to see how this livery evolves. But for now, I'm going to pop it in solid. And it's great to see Erebus get such strong backing. Then we get to the final few. We've got the CoolDrive Mustang. Again, one of the cars I did my first impressions on. This one's an interesting one because it is essentially the same livery they've run with a few little tweaks and obviously on the new shape of Mustang. A lot of people have different, you know, tolerances to liveries being carried over from year to year. You know, some people want to see something new every single year. Others, you know, actually like these liveries that persist. I sort of fit somewhere in the middle. I very much think if it's not broken, don't try and fix it. But at the same time, I like seeing things evolve a little bit. And for me, while the livery is largely the same on the new Gen 3 Mustang, this thing looks excellent. I think it's taken the livery to another level. So, you know, I'm taking marks. Oh, no, you know what? I'm going to put that in epic as well. I think, again, it's a very distinct livery. I love that the blue is sort of consistent throughout the whole car. Yeah, really nice livery, and I love that sort of metallic finish it's got going on as well. And speaking of the top, I'm going to put this next one up there, James Golding's Camaro here, the Nulong Camaro. Now, Premier Racing are an interesting one because they haven't actually unveiled their second car, which is, I'm really hoping that's going to be a Subway livery because I liked that last year. I thought it was really refreshing, pun intended. But for now, we can only really talk about the Nulong car, and I like this thing. It might be a little bit heavy on the white at the front, but overall, very, very mean looking livery. I think this, perhaps more than any other Camaro livery, really brings out the features of the car for some reason. I can't put my finger on it, but it looks really muscular and aggressive. Definitely keen to see this one hit the track, and hopefully Premier are going to be towards the front this year as well. For now, we're just going to put their unknown livery in the bad category. I'm certainly sure that their actual livery on that second car isn't going to be in that category though when it rolls around. Okay, let's finish up with the two big ones, the homologation teams for Chevy and for Ford, starting with Red Bull. And boy, did they take the red in Red Bull quite literally this year. There's a lot of red on this car, and I've got to admit, when I first saw it, I was not a fan. And truth be told, even as a GM supporter, I'm still not overly keen on this livery. The red, especially at the back of the car, just looks so out of place. It's like it's been taken off another vehicle and sort of plastered on what should be the Red Bull. So yeah, not the biggest fan of this one. When I first saw it, it was going straight in the bad category. It has grown on me a little bit, and this has happened for me in the past when they started introducing white into the Red Bull livery a few years back. Those sort of white decals, that grew on me as well, and actually really liked it in the end. The red, I think, is going to be a harder sell for me, but it is gradually improving. But yeah, it's just busy. It feels like they're trying to do too much on the one car. Even the sponsorship at the front where you've got the Red Bull on the bonnet. I can't even see what that is on the headlights there. But then you've got Super Cheap, and then you've got Quad Lock down the bottom. It's just a lot going on. So I'm going to pop this one in the okay category. Again, that's probably being on the generous side, but I suspect that's probably where it's going to be at the end of the year for me once I get used to it. Now, even as a GM supporter, I'm not afraid to say when a Ford team does a great job, and the Shell team. It's an iconic livery. It is epic, purely because of its history, and I think even taking that away on the Gen 3 cars, it looks fantastic as well. Really nice livery, simple, clean, harmonious. You know, it looks like the same car at the front as it does at the back, which I can't say the same for the Red Bull. So I really, really like that car. Once again, if you're a fan of the liveries being changed up each year, you might not be the biggest fan of the Shell car because it is largely the same as we've seen in recent years. But for me, one of those ones where it's not broken, don't fix it. And again, it just has so much history tied to it as well. So they are my rankings. If I had to pick a favorite Mustang, I would say that's probably a tie between the Monster Car and Nick Percat's machine. And my favorite car in the GM camp is absolutely Mark Winterbottom's DeWalt Racing Camaro. I think overall though, we've got a pretty good lineup going into the new season. I've been very nitpicky in this video, but I think we're in a pretty good spot with how a lot of these cars look. And if the new rules do what they're meant to, hopefully we're going to see a lot more of these machines fighting towards the front and a bit of diversity on that podium. And the good news is, we don't have to wait long to find out. Newcastle is just around the corner, so I've got all my attention now looking at bringing you guys that Newcastle preview video. Very excited to get those underway. And of course, throughout the whole season, I will be doing round previews, reviews, and loads of discussion videos just like this one in between. So please do subscribe if you want to follow that kind of content. A big thank you to the 600 plus people who have already subscribed to the channel before we've even got going with the new season. Really appreciate your support and hope to see you in another video very soon.